What are you looking at?
Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today we are surprisingly building something from a series I should have built from a long time ago. I'm shocked that I haven't ever built from Halo before, but that's what we're building from. I used to play it a lot as a younger guy, and it's kind of what kept me and my younger brother in touch with each other as he was still in school and I was off at college. So I'm going to build something from Halo. I was at a Five Below, which is like a dollar store kind of, and I saw some water guns and I just picked up every one that they had. One of them to me kind of looked very similar to a gun in Halo, at least the barrel end of it. Looked like one of the Type 25 carbines, or I refer to it as a brute spiker. It goes by a couple of different names. The hatchet gun. It's the gun that's got the like knives on the end of it. I thought it looked pretty fierce and would be something that I could hopefully put together and make it look super cool. And it's really made out of a Five Below water gun, some PVC, and some foam to fill in some spots. So today we are going to build a brute spiker from Halo 3 using a water gun that I bought at a dollar store. Let's get to building. So I bought like 10 water guns at the Five Below store the other day, and the cashier looked at me like I was a crazy person. I knew I was going to use them eventually, but they didn't know why a grown man was buying that many guns. I bought them because a lot of them had similar shapes to guns that I could recognize from like sci-fi shows and stuff, and this one really stood out to me because it looked like something from Halo. I realized it was not an exact match, but thought it would be an interesting rendition anyways. So I put on a cutting wheel on my Dremel and chopped off the end. I decided I could try and use mostly scrap materials for this build, so I rolled out my sci-fi barrel of foam offcuts and rummaged through my assortment of PVC pieces. I'm eyeballing the entire thing and kind of flying by the seat of my pants. Starting with the barrel end, I work my way back. The long piece of PVC will be the center support all the way to the handle, and the thicker diameter small pieces will act as the gun cartridge area. Then the rest will be filled in with random scrap foam. I start by plugging up the hole I just cut out of the water gun with some scrap floor mat foam. Then I free-handed a framework for the ammo cartridges to kind of sit in. You'll notice in the next shot that I plugged up the holes on the PVC pipes just like I did with the gun barrel. I ended up making 3 copies of the framework out of some 6mm foam and gluing it together. Once I had the framework done, I thought it would need a little more support than just that small strip. I made a slotted piece to increase the surface area. This video won't really be a step-by-step, but more like a brief overview of how I attacked the project. You could build it all from foam if you wanted to. I just wanted to combine random found objects with some scrap materials. The gun looks like a revolver on the end that I have to build out, and there's this rounded area behind the cylinder that I needed to kind of carve. So I found this cone that I had and cut off the end of it and then just shaped it a little bit by sanding it. I don't really make a lot of guns. Usually the ones I have done are either sci-fi or fantasy types. I did my best to line up a hole on all of my parts and drill it out so that my center support pipe can go through them all. This will make everything nice and rigid. I slowly heat up the PVC with my heat gun until it becomes flimsy and then bend it into the angle I want and hold it into place till it cools down. I get asked a lot what glue I use on projects, and the answer is I use a lot. It just depends on the circumstance. Foam to foam, I usually use contact cement. PVC to foam, I usually use super glue for an instant bond, and for this gun, I needed a little wiggle room when I inserted the center support, so I used some 5-minute epoxy. There's a different glue for different situations. Everyone has their favorite brands. Mine's usually Barge contact cement and most things made by Gorilla, so take that for what it's worth. To cover the rough ends of the plastic and make a better transition to the other materials, I glued down a strip of EVA to cover it. On the foam to foam side, I use contact cement, and then where the strip touches plastic, I glued down a little bead of super glue. I used a metal ruler to help me push the strip down into the corners as I work around. The rest of the detail work on the cylinder cartridges are just scrap pieces of foam cut, shaped, and sanded to resemble as close as I could eyeball the images I have access to. I usually work off 3 or 4 images from different angles to figure it out in my head. For the handle, I found another piece of floor mat foam, sanded off the texture on the back of it, and decided to just bulk it up with 4 pieces stacked together. The middle 2 pieces I'll cut a little center strip out of so that the PVC fits in it. I also bored out a little channel on the outside pieces so the PVC would sit in there nice and snug. Before I stuck it on, I carved some bevels and sanded it relatively smooth because some areas would be hard to reach once I glued it up. I realize I'm cutting towards myself in this shot, but I'm going really slow. The video is actually sped up 4 times the actual speed, and I'm making sure to keep my holding arm as parallel to the blade as possible. Because my barrel end is a little different, I had to modify parts of the design just a little bit to make it all fit together. My brackets that hold the blades are a little smaller than they probably should be, and I also had to skip some of the details that go underneath that piece. This type of building process of piecing it together and making it up as you go really works your brain to try and develop those layers of material to make the details as close to your reference material as possible. It's a fun process. With the brackets in place, I can now freehand the blade using my picture reference. I decided to use some 6mm what the foam for the blades because it's a super rigid EVA. I bulk it up into 2 layers and it's strong enough that it actually supports the weight of the gun fully. So I reinforced the inside connection where it meets the plastic with a little bit of hot glue to make like a faux welded bead line. I used some of my resin cast cyber molds from Evil Ted for the muzzle end of my gun. It's not exactly like the one in the game, but I thought it was close enough that that's what I'm using. I heat set all my foam with my heat gun and spray several layers of black spray paint / primer, then a little dusting of silver, brown, black, and a little blue for the base color. To pick up on all the details, I put down a wash of some brown and black acrylic paint from Plaid Effects. Once that dried, I went over all of the edges with a little bit of silver. I really like the heated metal discoloration effect on guns and metal parts, so I slapped a little on the end of my spiker. I know that's not actually how it is in the game, but I'm making it so I can make it how I want, I guess. The hottest area will be a metallic blue, followed by a red, then a gold the further you get away from the heat source. I like to use some metallic wax paint similar to Rub and Buff. I have a link to these in my affiliates page. They are Deco Arts Metallic Luster. To add the red markings on the gun, I just used a red acrylic paint pen and freehanded on the design. For the hand wrap, I used real leather. I buy remnant cuts for cheap at my local hobby store and cut it into strips. That little touch of actual leather just really sells the prop and makes it feel right in your hand. And we are finished. Here is the end result. Overall, I think it turned out pretty awesome. It actually has a little bit of weight to it, mainly because of the PVC, obviously, but I think it turned out all right. It's not too bad. Obviously, the barrel end of it is not an exact. It didn't have these little recesses in it, and this didn't have little cutouts like this. It kind of went over it, but I just kind of adjusted and went with it. The rest of it, I think, is fairly accurate in terms of proportions and what all it's got in there. And it feels pretty nice. It's got a really big handle, which is obvious because in the game Master Chief is big and so are these aliens that he's fighting, but overall I'm happy with it. Now the only thing that I would have liked to have done differently really is to add actual lights, which I'm not exactly comfortable with, but I am trying to learn here and there as I go. So definitely something that you could do if you're more comfortable with that. But Yeah, not too bad. I also realized that my paint job isn't exactly as accurate to the game as it could be. I did put a little bit of blue on my spray paint to add it to the base, but then I really kind of overdid it a little bit with my heat sink. So this has been fired very recently, a little bit overkill. So yeah, maybe you'll try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to turn dollar store water guns into relatively close to accurate, as much as could be, Halo guns. Yeah. Maybe you'll get some.
Yay!
And inevitably, someone's going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these. Tell them, much props. Let's see if I can fire off one of these. I'll try not to hit my wall back there, but the camera may absorb it.